Hello, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we will be taking a look at the self-propelled gun 2S1 Gvozdika and its service within the Ukrainian armed forces. The 2S1 Gvozdika, which translates to Carnation, was developed by the Soviet Union to replace its aging fleet of static field guns like the M30 and D30 at the regimental level. It was required to be amphibious and possess full NBC, that is nuclear biological chemical, protection. 3 contenders were considered as a base for the vehicle, with the winner being the ubiquitous workhorse of the Soviet Army, the MTLB. The standard variant would prove insufficient to handle all the equipment needed for the new self-propelled gun, so the chassis was stretched to accommodate an extra road wheel, a design that would itself be co-developed into the MTLB-U. Prototypes of the 2S1 would encounter development issues related to the propellant gas getting stuck in the turret, which would critically injure at least one test crew. Once these issues were ironed out, the design was approved in 1970 and would go into full-scale production in 1971. The Gvozdika would sport a 2A31 122mm gun, which was identical to the D30 it was meant to replace, with modifications to better suit the artillery piece to the confined conditions of the vehicle. Using the standard 3OF-24 or 56 high-explosive fragmentation rounds, the Gvozdika could reach out to a maximum of 15.3 kilometers or 9.5 miles. Primary production would be performed at the Kharkiv tractor plant, with license-built versions produced by Bulgaria and Poland. The Bulgarian-produced Gvozdikas were identical to their Soviet counterparts, though they are generally considered to have worse build quality. The Polish-produced vehicles, known in Polish as the Gvozdik, possessed better amphibious capabilities and superior fire control systems than those from Bulgaria or the Soviet Union. Between the three, over 10,000 Gvozdikas would be produced from 1971 to 1991. The Gvozdika would also be widely exported, having served with 45 nations over its long tenure. As the Soviet Union fractured and split into independent states, its massive pool of military equipment would be similarly partitioned. Ukraine would inherit 563 2S1 Gvozdikas from Soviet stocks and keep them in service into the new millennia. By the 2000s, however, the Gvozdika was rapidly showing its age. Not only was the system outdated, but the political situation at the time didn't necessitate such a massive artillery park. As a post-Soviet state, Ukraine had to tackle widespread economic depression and corruption. Many pieces of equipment were offered for sale, with the Gvozdika being no exception. Between 2000 and 2011, Ukraine would export a total of 118 Gvozdikas to Azerbaijan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Sudan. Many other vehicles were retired and placed in storage. In 2013, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense was in the process of removing all remaining Gvozdikas from active service, as it was believed these old relics wouldn't be needed for any serious operations in the foreseeable future. Then came 2014, and Ukraine's security priorities would be rapidly re-evaluated. As Ukrainian troops were sent east to deal with the deteriorating situation, all available firepower was hauled out of storage to shore up the then understrength brigades. While the Gvozdikas had only recently been retired and thus didn't require heavy refurbishing, it took time to reorganize the vehicles and find crews. The Carnations would make their presence felt in the fall of 2014, seeing combat all over Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Due to the fluid nature of the front lines and guerrilla tactics used by the separatists, Ukrainian units would be quite vulnerable to ambush or being quickly surrounded. This would result in the loss of at least 22 Gvozdikas destroyed or captured by Russian-aligned forces by the end of 2015. On top of the units brought out of storage, Ukraine would also purchase more units of Gvozdika from abroad. 40 of the classic 2S1 and 16 of the Polish variant were purchased and supplied via the Czech company Excalibur Army by the end of 2019. As the Gvozdika has been produced in Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union, it was not impossible to keep up logistical support for the current fleet of vehicles. In 2016, an upgrade program was proposed in order to bring the ancient Carnations up to a more modern standard, including a new engine, satellite navigation systems, and digital radios. It is difficult, however, to determine if any vehicles ended up undergoing this upgrade process. To shore up the longevity of the Gvozdika fleet, Ukraine also invested in producing new barrels for the 2A31 guns. This project does seem to have reached fruition, with production starting in Kramatorsk in 2020. So while the 2S1 system may not have been the most sophisticated, it was a vehicle that Ukraine could logistically support in the long term and as Ukraine moved into a new decade and a very uncertain future. As Russia's full-scale invasion unfolded on February 24th, 2022, the Ukrainian 2S1 fleet would be immediately thrown into the heat of battle. They were deployed with a number of different units all across the nation. In the battle for Kyiv alone, the Gvozdika would see action with the 81st Air Mobile, 80th and 95th Air Assault Brigades, the 1st and 3rd Tank Brigades, the 10th and 128th Mountain Assault Brigades, and the 14th, 72nd, and 93rd Mechanized Brigades. The Russians would also leave some of their own self-propelled guns behind in the chaos of the early stages of the war, though by this point in time, most of the Russian Gvozdikas were stationed elsewhere, resulting in the capture of only 8 2S1s from the VSRF. As international support for Ukraine rapidly assembled, many former Eastern Bloc nations offered up their Soviet-era leftovers. Poland has provided at least 20 2S1 as aid and sold 92 additional units to Ukraine. Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, and Finland have also provided Gvozdikas as aid or offered them for sale, though there is very little transparency regarding how many have been provided by each partner. Denmark has also provided assistance in procuring Gvozdikas, though it is unclear where these vehicles came from or in what quantity. Ukraine has also received 122mm ammunition from a wide variety of sources and circumstances. There was a sizable stockpile of Soviet-era ammunition still in inventory at the start of the full-scale invasion, though this has likely been exhausted. Shells and charges have been provided as aid, with assistance from or purchased from Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Germany, Pakistan, Poland, Romania, Serbia, Slovakia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Some of the ammo provided by the US is of Iranian origin, having been seized from arms shipments. Ukraine has also been producing its own ammunition for some time now, with facilities on home soil and abroad. Ukrainian defense firm Ukroboronprom claims that the first domestically produced shells were in the field by March of 2023. It was also claimed that these shells are produced with a thicker fragmentation sleeve than the older Soviet models for greater effect on target. Other types of ammo seen include illumination and smoke rounds. The intensity of the war has seen heavy attrition across all arms of the Ukrainian military, and the artillery is no exception. With the ability of long-range drones to attack targets behind the front and provide detailed surveillance, heavy guns have been under constant pressure and seen heavy losses. This is especially the case for the Gvozdika, as its short range requires it to be stationed relatively close to the front line in order to provide fire support. As of the time of this recording, late July 2026, Ukraine has been visually confirmed to have lost 377 Gvozdikas damaged, destroyed, or captured. Direct replacement of these units will be more difficult to come by over time. Worldwide, there are still many operators of the 2S1 Gvozdika, though a lot of them would be considered hostile or non-aligned. Several of Ukraine's allies are still phasing out old Soviet equipment in exchange for more capable, newly produced vehicles, so some units could become available in the upcoming years. More than likely, however, is that Ukraine will have to replace the 2S1 with more analogous systems such as NATO standard 105mm artillery. For the units still in service, though, there is a solid logistics chain that can keep them shooting and scooting for the foreseeable future. Ukraine has invested significantly in keeping the Gvozdika operational since 2022, and does not appear to have the same degree of infrastructure yet to supply 105mm systems. So it seems, for the time being, that the Gvozdika will continue its legacy as an old Soviet workhorse for the duration of the war and possibly into the future beyond. This video was possible in great part due to the amazing work of author Wen Jianchun with their book War in Ukraine Volume 9, as well as Jeff21461 and Helvagen on Twitter. Their handles are mentioned in the bibliography. Be sure to let me know what piece or family of equipment you think I should cover next, artillery or otherwise. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.